What were the greatest moments during the regular season in the 2023-24 season? We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, August 31st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at L_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix, and 3 times a week during the off season. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show to once again celebrate the Summer of Champions. Today, we are going to discuss Carter Verhaeghe's day with the cup as he had it yesterday. We're going to discuss more about what happened during WWE Monday Night Raw. And also in the second and third segment, we are going to do something that we do every year here on the show. Now with the Stanley Cup Championship, we are going to look at the top 10 regular season moments of 2023-24 and also do another episode separately on the top 10 postseason moments of the season for the Florida Panthers. But on today's show, we are going to be doing this all with and it's a Wednesday, which means it's a Winans Wednesday edition of the show, which means Jacob Winans is back here. Jacob, another off-season show, my friend, and grateful to have you back once again.
Yeah, thank you as always for having me. I love doing these every year when we talk about the top 10 moments. I'm super excited for that segment. And yeah, recapping another Florida Panthers day with the cup. These never get old.
Oh, definitely not. They never do. And the latest one to get their day with the cup, actually the second time he's had a day with the cup, and this one is Carter Verhaeghe. And also, by the way, guys, if you want to also follow the timeline of the days with the cup, NHL.com does have a blog of it, and it's going to be updated as other guys will get their days with the cup, as a few members of the Florida Panthers still have yet to have their days. Sergei Bobrovsky and Dmitry Kulikov are two of the ones that come to the top of my head for the Panthers. But Verhaeghe getting his day with the cup and the video of him and his wife Casey originally lifting it in his home in Watertown, Ontario. So also just the feeling of just even though he's winning it he's having the celebration for a second time there, it just feels like even the look on his face looked like that he was experiencing it for the first time. And we're going to ignore the fact that he was wearing his Tampa Bay Lightning championship ring during the celebration. I don't know if you caught that, Jacob.
Yep, I saw that. I can't hate on him for it. He's a 2-time Cup champ, so I'd be showing it off too. But yeah, he's. Well, I'll pretend I didn't see it. We'll have to overlook that.
For sure. And something about Carter Verhaeghe's character too, about what was so special about the day with the cup. Obviously, multiple times we've discussed about ice cream. We've discussed about golf. Obviously, Aaron Ekblad did it recently with golf and also his grandma. But also, Carter Verhaeghe also had an opportunity to get the day with the cup and have his 92-year-old grandmother there. And he wasn't expecting her to be there too. And when you think of a moment where you've lived such a long time, for someone like Verhaeghe's grandmother, not taking a moment like this for granted, as you never know if your grandson is going to do it also ever again too. Obviously, we want more of that for Verhaeghe, especially if he signs long term. But also for Carter, the one that really stuck out to me most is just looking out for other people, and including the Burlington Special Olympics floor hockey team too, where Philip Pritchard actually got a video of him playing hockey with the people. So also goes to show the character of Carter Verhaeghe during his day with the cup.
Yeah, he's a class act. And we talk about this so much with the Panthers. It's just this theme of growing the game. and expanding access to the sport to all different walks of life and all different sort of types of people and everyone wanting to be able to take part in this fantastic sport that we call hockey. And for him to do that with the floor hockey team, that's really special. I think that's really cool. And I think it speaks to sort of the culture and the values that the Panthers have now of just growing the game and building community and access for the sport. They take it to heart, and it extends way beyond South Florida. That was really, really cool to see. And that's a testament to the kind of guy Verhaeghe is. He's, like I said, he's a class act, and I love seeing that.
No doubt. And after Verhaeghe gets his day with the cup will make its way a little more east, as it will be making its way to Quebec, where Roberto Luongo will now be getting his day with the cup next. And he actually announced it on Monday night during a Monday Night Raw from Amerant Bank Arena in the interview with him and Jackie Redmond. But during that interview with him and Jackie Redmond, maybe you guys out there have heard of this guy, especially if you follow WWE. By the guy by the name of CM Punk intervened during their interview. Obviously, they're big hockey fan. CM Punk, Chicago Blackhawks fan, is if you follow Jackie Redmond on Twitter or Instagram, she's always having a whole bunch of crossovers with WWE and hockey too, and also the wrestlers who are also hockey fans too. And CM Punk is definitely a really noticeable one for that. And also discussing in that interview how he hated Roberto Luongo as a player, but also switched gears, saying how it's also great to see good guys winning it too. Obviously, Luongo spoke about eating pasta at his brother-in-law's restaurant in Broward County, but also having a chance to eat some poutine out of it on Wednesday when he goes to his brother's restaurant in Montreal too. So a great opportunity there for Roberto Luongo. So what did you think of that when you saw it, Jacob?
I thought that was awesome. I used to love wrestling as a kid. CM Punk is a heck of a personality. He's a known hockey fan, a Chicago Blackhawks fan. So he's always been one to talk about hockey, and it's not the first time actually since the Panthers won the cup that he's mentioned the Panthers in his media. I did see during the shortly after the draft, actually, he did a press conference and he called attention to the fact that no one at the draft congratulated the Panthers on winning the Stanley Cup. And he said, I don't know why people aren't congratulating them, but I'll take some time in my press conference to congratulate the Panthers on winning the Stanley Cup. I thought that was really cool. He showed his hockey knowledge when he brought up the 2011 Roberto Luongo run with Vancouver, how they knocked Chicago out of the playoffs that year, and how he was disappointed, and Luongo personally sort of took his team out of the race that season, and they thought they were going to go back to back. So he's got his hockey history down.
Mm-hmm.
And just on a personal level, I don't know. I don't think I've ever mentioned this on anywhere publicly, but CM Punk has always been one of my favorite personalities in the sports and entertainment field. Just in the past couple of years, funny story. I actually when he was with AEW, he was doing an event in Orlando, and I was in a rush driving by the arena and actually almost ran him over with my car. He was getting off the bus, and I almost ran him over with my car. So if I had not hit the brakes, maybe that interview doesn't happen. But
wow.
He was super cool about it, laughed it off, waved to me, no hard feelings at all. And just for that reason, always a CM Punk fan, especially now that he's supporting my team. So shout out to CM Punk, and apologies for almost running you over 3 years ago now.
Wow, what a curveball here on the Locked On Florida.
Yep.
with Jacob, strange encounter with CM Punk, and also I don't know where to go from there, but
yeah, tough to follow that one up, but
yeah. Hey, we have some history here on the show, and that is definitely going into the history books here. But also, Roberto Luongo, also to wrap this segment up, was also asked about rooting for him or Drew McIntyre, and also compared to the hate between Claude Lemieux and Chris Draper. And also, if he were a UFC fighter, if he had to mix words with someone, if he would have to do it, he would. And talking about, hey, I'm a goalie. I didn't really get to experience it much, but if he had to, he would. And that's spoken like a really true hockey player, regardless of position. For Roberto Luongo, I'm still laughing just about your story, Jacob. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where now we are going to discuss more of the top 10 regular season moments between the Florida Panthers in the regular season. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And we're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search. Don't search, match with Indeed. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 92% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And you can leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners to the show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on. Right now, support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day with national experts and local insight from every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So in the next 2 segments, we are going to discuss more about our top 10 favorite moments during the regular season here on the show. And obviously we've done this in the past too, where we've discussed the top 10 moments, but we decided to combine back then regular season and postseason. And I figured that it was very postseason dominant and not enough love to the regular season. So this summer, I wanted to give a lot of love for the regular season because it is such a big part of the journey. And also, when you think about 10 moments out of 52 wins for the Florida Panthers, 82 regular season games, there were some that stuck out. But to put 10 and for some to leave out, that was the more difficult part for me, Jacob, too. So this we don't know what each other's lists look like. So let's begin with our top 10. In this segment, we'll do 10 through 6. So I'm going to start with number 10 for me is sorry, scrolling down. Sorry. February 24th, 2024. It was a 3-2 overtime win against the Washington Capitals. Panthers allowed both goals on the PK. Playing catch-up, Gustav Forsling wins in overtime. But the part that sticks out for me was after the game when Barkov set his career high in penalty minutes and was asked about it to Paul Maurice. And that was where the famous goon word came out of Paul Maurice's mouth and saying, I can't control him. I've tried. And that came in that moment on February 24th, 2024. And also, number 9 for me, January 27th of 2024 at the New York Islanders, back-to-back games where they won past regulation. Panthers didn't really play a lot of overtime games to that point of the season, and it was a great thing for the Florida Panthers to go into the All-Star break with positive momentum. The night before, they were in Pittsburgh, and then on that game-winning goal in overtime, all the players who got a point for the Panthers was an offseason acquisition by Bill Zito. Solars decides to not freeze the puck, gets it out to Erod. OEL scores the game winner to send the Florida Panthers into the All-Star break on a positive note. So you're 10 and 9, Jacob.
Yeah, so as I always do with these lists, I'll just give you a couple of quick honorable mentions because we had to cut these lists into 10, which was nearly impossible. So my first honorable mention, the 8-4 win over Colorado on the road. That one gets overlooked a lot, but that was a really, really fun offensive game. I got the home opener against Toronto. I've got the Nick Cousins hero game against Columbus. And I've got the Nico Mikkola band for band game with Connor McDavid, trading goals. And the Panthers won 5-3. But my number 10, I'm going to go with Matthew Tkachuk's hat trick in St. Louis. And
Natural
that
hat trick.
was a natural hat trick, and that was January 9th. Panthers won that game 5-1, but the key for that one being in my top 10 list is Tkachuk scores that hat trick in St. Louis, where Keith Tkachuk starred, and the city that Matthew Tkachuk considers his hometown, really. Which looking over at St. Louis now, I don't know if you saw this, but he spent a day with Jason Tatum and throwing out the first pitch at a Cardinals game. I thought that was really cool. St. Louis is a very special place to him. So for him to get a hat trick there in that building was really cool. And there was a cool fan moment in that game as well. A young Panthers fan, a kid was trying to throw a hat onto the ice for the hat trick, and a St. Louis Blues fan gave him one to throw, which I thought was really awesome. One of my favorite moments of the entire season. Number 9 for me is February 17th. The Panthers absolutely demolished Tampa on the road, 9-2. And that was probably one of the most satisfying wins of the season. And I think looking forward, when the Panthers meet up with the Lightning in the playoffs, that looking back at that game was like we can beat these guys. We can handle them. And that 9-2 win on the road went a long way towards that.
Yeah, I have one of those in my top 10, but later on in the top 10 for me there too. And for me, number 8 for me was February 15th at Buffalo. It was a 45 save shutout by Anthony Stolarz in that one for the Florida Panthers. And Panthers were dominating, 4-0 win, and then Ryan Lomberg gets a power play goal when the game was already out of hand, and then showboats towards the Buffalo bench. But also, that along with that, it's just been Stolarz shutouts that have stuck out. There was another one that he had on January 22nd, where they did it without Alexander Barkov and Gustav Forsling, which Gustav Forsling was not there due to the birth of his child there too. So the Panthers were able to still find a way to win even without those guys too. But number 7 for me, January 4th, 2024 at Vegas, Barkov and Erod get injured in that game, but the Panthers still explode for some offense, get on the power play as well. That was a big stretch of the power play for the Panthers, including the very next game where we saw Bubble Barkov against Colorado, which you mentioned earlier about the 8-4 game, which it was tied, and then the Panthers scored 4 unanswered there. But January 4th was the first win ever in Vegas for the Florida Panthers, and that was a big monkey off their back too for them. So that for the Panthers, that game in Vegas was number 7. So you're 8 and 7, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm going to go way off board, and this may be against the rules that we usually set here, but I'm going to do it anyway. Number 8 for me is actually not a game. Number 8 for me is the trade deadline. The Panthers bringing in Tarasenko and Kyle Okposo for very little in draft capital. I think, the results speak for themselves. Both guys contributed in a huge way to the Panthers winning the Stanley Cup. Kyle Okposo never scored a goal as a Panther, and his presence went way beyond that. And Tarasenko, it would be reasonable to suggest that the Panthers may not win the cup if not for Tarasenko joining the team, because his addition allowed the Panthers to create so much balance, and it allowed Erod to be able to move to a couple of different lines, and Tarasenko really was the key reason for unlocking the potential of Anton Lundell in his playoff run. And if you look at his stats pre Tarasenko and post Tarasenko, he found his stride with Tarasenko on his wing. So for me, that was a big moment in the Panthers regular season. It wasn't a game, but those trade deadline moves made all the difference. So that's number 8 for me. And then number 7 for me, also not a game. Number 7 for me is the Panthers extending Gustav Forsling. That's a franchise changing move. The Panthers locking him up when they did, getting him to sign a long-term deal with the the very low cap hit that they're going to pay him for the next 8 years. That's the kind of thing that extends your cup window and keeps you winning championships. So that was a huge moment as well. And for me, regular season, it's not all about the games. It's also about the smart moves of a GM on the road to a Stanley Cup. And I think those were the two biggest days that Bill Zito had as far as the regular season goes.
Hey, you had 2 trades and the signing for one, and I had that Paul Maurice quote earlier. So hey, you're not breaking any rules.
There we go
on it. So great 2 moments that you listed for that. Number 6 for me, right before we transition to segment number 2, is November 30th of 2023, and it was a game in Montreal where the Panthers were in the middle of their road trip, their Eastern Canadian road trip. And it was a 5-1 win where Alexander Barkov had that pick 6 on a pass from Lindstrom to Alex Newhook, and him and Sam Reinhart go 2-on-1, and he beats Caden Primo on the glove side. All 5 of those goals were on the glove side of Primo, by the way, too. And so that was just a defensive wizardry by Alexander Barkov. So that is number 6 for me. Your number 6, my friend.
My number 6, I'm actually going to go 3 days before yours. Panthers are in Ottawa. And this is the infamous Garrett Rank game. Every player on the ice gets a misconduct. That game was so Florida Panthers for it to end that way. And the taunting between the Tkachuk brothers, and Brady gets thrown out, and there's a bunch of guys fighting on the ice. Everyone gets thrown out of the game. And then and my favorite part of that whole scrum is at the very end of it, Anthony Stolarz moves on to a skater's position on the bench. Begging for ice time. I thought that was one of the funniest and best moments of the Panthers season, and it was very much their personality for the rest of the year.
And so many battles between the Panthers and the Senators, even going back to the 2023 season where Brady Tkachuk ended up being in Keith Tkachuk's suite after that too. So that definitely some fun battles, and definitely going to be even better battles, hopefully coming in the 2024-25 season. But we're going to continue on this conversation of the top 10 regular season moments / games in segment number 3. We are going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And you heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season afternoon out-of-market game. All you need to is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday, August 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show, where we are going to continue the discussion of our 5 favorite regular season moments for the Florida Panthers in the 2023-24 season. And number 5 for me, Jacob, is January 11th, 2024. That was after. This was also in the middle of a stretch where Sam Reinhart was scoring special teams goals in 8 straight games, which included power play goals and shorthanded. And each of those games some of those games even had just him scoring once. So it was just, you saw ones, and then you saw in different categories if you were to look at the game logs and the stat lines. So, but this one for the Panthers, they trail most of the game. And then Sam Reinhart gets the buzzer beater with 1 second left in this game. There's still plenty of time for the Panthers to still make things happen as far as the Atlantic and even for them. But even before that, Matthew Tkachuk tied it with 2:18 left with that. And Panthers, they were throwing the kitchen sink at Cam Talbot, 41 shots in that game. So that is number 5 for me, that game winner from Sam Reinhart. And number 4 is actually a game that you mentioned earlier, the 9-2 game where the Florida Panthers beat the Tampa Bay Lightning on the road on February 17th, 2024, for them. And that game had a goalie interference that was challenged, and then the Panthers scored on that failed challenge by Tampa Bay, and it was over right after the first period of through 20 minutes. And it's crazy to think that Tampa Bay also scored less than 30 seconds into the game, and the Panthers ended up scoring 9 straight after that too for them. So that is number 4 for me. So you're number 5 and number 4 for me, my friend.
Yeah, so actually, real quick on your number 4, I think it's funny that you point out the failed coaches challenge for Tampa and that one, because it the foreshadowing there, how unkind the goalie interference calls were going to be to Tampa against Florida in the playoffs was pretty funny. They had a really rough time with goalie interference against Florida this year. But my number 5 actually is the same as your number 5. I've got the Sam Reinhart overtime buzzer beater versus LA. And that move, that backhand was just ridiculous. Looking back on all the goals this season, that was probably one of the most skilled goals that we saw the entire year. To take that step out, get the use the little time and space he had and flick it backhand over the shoulder. Only a select few people in the entire world can pull off a shot like that. And Sam Reinhart was red hot at that time. So that's my number 5. My number 4 is the Panthers game against the Golden Knights on December 23rd. In this game, the Panthers absolutely dominated them. 4-2 was actually a generous score for Vegas. The Panthers, I think, had something like a 25 shot advantage midway through that game. It was absolute insanity. And this was at a time where the Panthers were really struggling to score. They had hit a little bit of a dry spell, and Sam Bennett comes in on the rush through the neutral zone and just whips one on goal from outside the hashes, and the Panthers took off from there. But my favorite part of this game wasn't the score. It wasn't the dominant play. It wasn't even the big scrum at the end with Matthew Tkachuk going after Pietrangelo. It was the Ryan Lomberg one punch to Keegan Colasar, the one punch man. KO'd Keegan Colasar on one punch in their fight, and I think that set the tone for the entire team. The building went absolutely bonkers, and Lomberg spoke after the game saying that he'd been waiting for that one because obviously it was Colasar who broke Tkachuk's sternum in the Stanley Cup final last year on a clean hit, nothing intentional, but it was Colasar who also called the Panthers pretenders and said they didn't want it, and then he drops the gloves with a much smaller Ryan Lomberg and was dispatched on one punch. I thought that was one of my favorite moments of the entire season.
Yeah, little do people know that was me who asked the question to Ryan Lomberg if he's ever heard of the anime One Punch Man, and he replied saying, "Is that about me?"
I had to bring it up.
One of the funniest answers that I ever heard Ryan Lomberg in a media scrum after a game. So definitely a really funny moment for Ryan Lomberg there too. And also, speaking of Ryan Lomberg, you'll see where I'm going on this one. Number 3 for me is March 4th, 2024, where the Florida Panthers visit the New York Rangers. They defeat them 4-2 at the Garden. Panthers were trailing midway through the second period. They were on the power play. Carter Verhaeghe and Alexander Barkov play give and go. Barkov was just fighting off a check. Puck goes in the air. He taps it 1, 2, 3 times around Keandre Miller, and then gets it to Sam Reinhart for the game-tying goal on the power play. And then later on in that one, Ryan Lomberg gets the game-winning goal, and there's that highlight of him like sticking his tongue out towards the MSG crowd too. So that one is another funny moment that Ryan Lomberg had there, and it also showed that the Panthers could play along with a team like the New York Rangers. Also, even in their loss later on in that month, they showed where they were shorthanded. They also played pretty well, and that was during their 2 wins in a 10-game stretch. I remember that too. Number 2 for me, April 16th, 2024, game number 82 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. After falling behind 2-0 and knowing what was at stake with the Atlantic Division, after the 2-0 deficit, we were thinking, okay, looks like it's going to be Panthers against the Maple Leafs in round 1. And then the Panthers, they go full, all gas, no breaks, finish the game dominating 36 shots to 12 in the final 40. And then they defeat the Toronto Maple Leafs by a final score of 5-2. The Panthers get help from the Ottawa Senators against the Boston Bruins, and the Panthers clinch the Atlantic Division title. And we are also questioning whether Carter Verhaeghe should have returned for that game too, prior to the postseason too. Let's not forget that. So Panthers go into that one, and that was in the middle of winning 4 straight at home too. We're little margin for error for the Atlantic Division too. So that one is number 2 for me. You're 3-2, my friend.
Believe it or not, I have the same 2, just in different order. So my number 3 is that Panthers Maple Leafs game, last game of the season. Like you said, the Panthers, everyone's wondering, are they going to lose on purpose or rest guys or take it easy so that they can get the easier matchup of the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round and avoid Tampa? Everyone was thinking, Tampa is the Panthers' boogeyman. Should they avoid the Lightning on purpose? They had no interest in doing that. They went out and stomped all over the Maple Leafs that night. Toronto came out and tried to play a physical brand of hockey and beat up on the Panthers. Panthers weren't having it. Gave it right back to them, and they scored 5 goals in that one. And my favorite part of that was all eyes were on this game for Austin Matthews and his chase for 70 goals. Yep. Panthers absolutely shut him down. They force-fed him the puck, tried to get him any look they could, and the Panthers just refused to let him score. And I think that was just a little bit of a precursor to how they were going to play in the playoffs with the just smothering defense on every team's star player. The Panthers showed in that one to end the regular season that they can take anybody's star player out of the game whenever they feel like it. So that was my number 3. And then my number 2 is that game in New York. The Barkov goal, or the Barkov assist on Sam Reinhart's goal, one of the most ridiculous displays of hockey skill that I've ever seen. The hand-eye coordination. There was a lot of hype going into that game. It's a game in the Garden. Panthers and Rangers are both competing for a President's Trophy at this point, basically neck and neck in the standings, and starting to get to that time of year. And Barkov turned it up and made an unbelievable play around Keandre Miller, who's a fantastic defenseman. And then Ryan Lomberg getting the game winner. Very unlikely source of game-winning offense there. And I that's one of my favorite games of the year. But that Barkov play was just unbelievable, and he makes it look so routine. He gets up and he's just pointing at Sam Reinhart, who scores the goal. And Reinhart, all he had to do was tap it in. The real highlight there is Barkov, but Barkov's always it's like he does this stuff every day.
Yeah. So just Barkov, another fantastic play, and we're just thinking, how does he do it? As far as the wizardry of just how he stick handles the puck too, for him. But number 1 for me, and this is actually one that you mentioned earlier, and it's just flat out hilarious from how that game just came about. And number 1 for me was everybody on the ice gets a 10-minute misconduct from Garrett Rank, where the Panthers defeat the Ottawa Senators by a final score of 6-0 on the road in Ottawa too. And crazy to think that it wasn't in that game those games specifically, but in that season series, Anton Lundell had 2 sharp angle shots for goals against the Ottawa Senators too. So that Anton Lundell has performed well against Ottawa last year, but just how the Panthers and just how they were able to, when you look at certain division rivals over the years, we've seen long winning streaks against Detroit, Montreal, Ottawa too for them. And it's really just about asserting their dominance. And that really showed early on for them. And just the fact that something that was so unexpected with Garrett Rank saying that quote, I just found it so funny for that. So that was my favorite moment of the regular season. So you're number 1, my friend.
My number 1 is actually one that you already said, and you said it way earlier. I was surprised to see this one so far down your list. Number 1 for me was that February 24th game against the Capitals. One, I'm a little biased because Panthers Capitals was always my favorite game growing up, being from the DC area. I used to love seeing those matchups, especially back in Ovechkin's prime. I used to love watching those two go at it, even though the Capitals
Southeast Division rivals too.
Old Southeast Division rivals. Capitals usually came out on top, but it was always a good matchup for me. But this one in particular was one of the best hockey games, just from a pure entertainment standpoint, that we saw all season long. Incredible goaltending, really, really fun, high octane action during the 60 minutes, and the overtime was everything that you want to see in a 3-on-3 overtime. It was up and down, chances both ways. You could not
No
sit
regroups
down
in the neutral zone.
No regroups in the neutral zone, except for one time Brandon Montour was gassed and threw it back to Stolarz, and even that almost backfired because the ice was bad. So it didn't make it to behind the net, and Stolarz had to skate out, had everyone scared to death. Stolarz made an incredible save on Ovechkin. There was a putback attempt on that. He stopped that with the pad. But what sets this one apart for me was the Capitals had a 3-on-1 against Gus Forsling, who had been on the ice for a good 30 to 45 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. They had a 3-on-1 chance, and Sonny Milano, who's a pretty good stick handler, has some good skill. Forsling stripped him and completely broke up a 3-on-1 by himself. And then Sam Bennett takes it the other way, and then Forsling gets on his horse, skates back full speed after breaking up the 3-on-1, doesn't go for a change, lines up for a one-timer, and bombs the game winner in the Capitals net. I thought that was the most electric play of the regular season. And it was everything about Gus Forsling there. The incredible defense, shuts down a 3-on-1, immediately turns around and goes and wins the game. That was fantastic. One of my favorite games that I've seen in years. So that's my number one.
Yeah, and for Gustav, for him, just how he's able to just get into the play and just not give up, and knowing that there's a chance out there. Knowing that there's tired bodies on the ice too. That's also another thing for Gus, that he could just recognize it, and also with the open ice helps him got that game winner to on that date in February 24th. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the show. Another successful Winans Wednesday, where we discuss the top 10 favorite regular season moments of the season. But Panther fans, comment below on what your favorite moments were of the regular season too. So make sure, if you guys want to participate, you can also comment down below here on the show. So Jacob, tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8. And like Armando said, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some of those responses for your favorite regular season moments. We had a lot to pick from, and it took a lot of work to narrow these down. So I'm interested to see what we may have missed.
Thank you so much, Jacob, and see you next week, my friend.
Can't wait. Thank you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.